The Christmas they left me with the kids. The first thing my mother said after I spent 9 hours traveling across the country for Christmas was, "Perfect, you're finally here. The kids' schedule is on the refrigerator." No hug. No Merry Christmas. No asking whether my flight had been delayed. Just four small winter coats piled beside the stairs, and my younger sister standing behind her with a suitcase already zipped. "What schedule?" I asked. My mother looked annoyed that I needed clarification. "Kendra's kids. We leave for Aspen in 2 hours." I stared at her, then at my sister, then at the four children who had apparently been told their aunt had flown from Seattle to North Carolina for the privilege of becoming unpaid Christmas childcare. Kendra laughed and said, "Don't look so traumatized, Delaney. You don't have kids. You'll survive 1 week." My father walked past carrying ski boots and added, "Think of it as your contribution to the family trip." The family trip I had planned. The family trip I had paid almost $19,000 toward. The family trip they had quietly removed me from 3 weeks earlier because someone needed to stay home with Kendra's children. I put my suitcase upright, reached into my coat pocket, and said, "You should probably check the lodge reservation before you load the car." My mother froze. Kendra stopped smiling. Dad slowly lowered the ski boots. "Why?" Mom asked. I looked at the same people who had spent years teaching me that my money was family money, my free time was family time, and my boundaries were selfishness, because I canceled the part I paid for. The silence that followed was the first Christmas gift I had given myself in years. My name is Delaney Price. I was 35 years old that December, living in Seattle, and working as a senior operations manager for a hospital network. My job was not particularly glamorous. I coordinated staffing systems, facility projects, emergency logistics, and the thousand invisible things that have to work correctly before patients and nurses ever notice them. I made good money because I had spent 13 years becoming very good at solving expensive problems before they became disasters. My family translated that differently. To them, Delaney had money. Delaney was organized. Delaney had no husband, no children, and therefore apparently no legitimate claim on her own time. I grew up outside Charlotte, North Carolina, with my parents, Darlene and Keith, and my younger sister, Kendra. Kendra was 3 years younger and had been the center of our family weather system for as long as I could remember. If she was happy, everyone relaxed. If she was upset, the house changed temperature. When I brought home straight A's, Dad said, "That's our Delaney." When Kendra passed algebra after nearly failing it, Mom took her to dinner because she worked so hard. When I saved for my first laptop, Kendra borrowed it without asking and cracked the screen. Mom told me to stop being territorial because my sister already felt terrible. When I protested, she said the sentence that became the soundtrack of my childhood. "You're the older one. Be mature." Mature meant absorb it. Mature meant surrender the bigger bedroom when Kendra wanted it because I would leave for college first. Mature meant drive her places after I got my license. Mature meant stop crying faster because Kendra's feelings lasted longer and therefore required more attention. My parents did love me. That is what makes favoritism so confusing. They attended school events when convenient. Dad taught me to drive. Mom stayed up with me when I had pneumonia. There were birthday cakes, vacations, Christmas gifts. Nobody locked me in an attic. I simply learned that love came with job descriptions, and mine was reliable daughter. Kendra's was beloved emergency. When I left for college in Washington State, Mom cried harder than I expected. 2 months later, she called because Kendra wanted to join a competitive dance program, and the fees were a little much. I was 19, working at the campus library, and somehow ended up sending $200 from my textbook money. "I'll replace it," Mom promised. She never did. I worked more hours. That was the first time my family discovered distance did not prevent me from solving things. After graduation, I stayed on the West Coast. I began in hospital procurement, moved into logistics, then operations. My salary grew gradually, but my lifestyle stayed modest because every increase seemed to coincide with another family need. Dad had shoulder surgery. Mom's transmission failed. Kendra needed help with a security deposit, then daycare, then braces for her oldest, then a minivan repair. Every request came framed as temporary, reasonable, and morally difficult to refuse. The kids need a safe car. Dad cannot recover if he is worried about bills. Mom cannot lose the house over one bad month. You're doing well, Delaney. We're so proud of you. Nobody ever said, "Your income belongs to us." They did not have to. They simply treated yes as my personality, and no as evidence something was wrong. Kendra married a man named Brent when she was 24. Brent worked residential construction and made decent money when work was steady, but steady was not a word anyone used about Brent. He could install cabinets beautifully, disappear on a fishing weekend without telling anyone, and somehow believe a tax refund counted as retirement planning. They had 4 children in 8 years: Carter, Miles, Sophie, and baby Drew. I loved those kids. That mattered because my family learned early that love for children could be converted into leverage. We're short on groceries, but don't worry, the kids can eat cereal. Money sent. The van is making a horrible noise, but Kendra has school pickup tomorrow. Money sent. Daycare says they'll lose Drew's spot if we don't pay by Friday. Money sent. I did not feel exploited at first. I felt useful. There is a dangerous kind of pride in being the person who can fix things. When my family called in a panic, my anxiety rose. I solved the problem. Everyone relaxed, and for a moment I felt essential. That can become addictive. Being needed can imitate being valued if you do not look too closely. The first time I started looking closely was Thanksgiving, 3 years before the Christmas trip. I flew home for 5 days even though my department was implementing a new scheduling system, and my boss had asked whether I wanted to attend a leadership retreat. Mom said Thanksgiving would not be the same without me. I believed her. By Wednesday afternoon, I was chopping vegetables while Kendra went shopping with Mom. Thursday morning, I was making breakfast for the kids because Brent wanted to watch football with Dad. I cooked 2 side dishes, coordinated dinner timing, cleaned as we went, and spent most of the afternoon preventing Drew from feeding rolls to the dog. After dinner, Mom announced she wanted a family photograph for Christmas cards. Everyone gathered in the backyard. She handed me her phone. "Delaney, you take it. You always make people look good." I laughed. "Can't we use the timer? The kids won't stand still that long." So I took 12 photographs of my parents, Kendra, Brent, and the 4 children. Then Aunt Ruth offered to take one with me included. Mom said, "We already got the good one. The kids are done." 2 weeks later, the card arrived at my Seattle apartment. Across the top it said, "From our whole family to yours." I was not in the photograph. When I called Mom, she sounded genuinely confused by my hurt. "Honey, you live across the country. Everybody knows you're part of the family. The card says whole family. Do you really want us to redesign Christmas cards because you're feeling sensitive?" Kendra later texted, "Please don't ruin Mom's holidays over a picture." I apologized. That is the part I hate admitting. I apologized for noticing I had been erased. The following Thanksgiving, I did not come because I was working. Mom posted a photograph captioned, "So thankful all my babies are under one roof." When I commented, "One baby is in Seattle," she deleted it. I checked because apparently I had not yet developed enough self-respect to stop checking. The pattern became clearer after Kendra and Brent moved into a larger rental. Their old house had 3 bedrooms. The new one had 5, a fenced yard, and rent almost $900 higher. I asked whether they could comfortably afford it. Kendra said the kids deserved space. Mom told me not to be negative. 3 months later, Kendra called crying because Brent had missed work after hurting his wrist. Could I help for 1 month? I covered $1,800. 1 month became 6. Then Mom said it would be easier if I simply set up an automatic transfer while they stabilized. I did. $900 every month. I told myself it was for the kids. That same year, Dad retired earlier than planned, and my parents discovered retirement income felt smaller once it arrived. I began paying their internet and part of their homeowner's insurance. When the air conditioner failed, I covered the replacement because Charlotte in August is not a moral lesson anyone needs to learn. Mom told everyone at church that Keith and she were blessed to have children who look after us. Children, plural. Kendra sent flowers. I sent $6,000. Still, I stayed in a small Seattle apartment because every time I considered buying something, the responsible part of my brain asked what would happen if my family had an emergency the following month. Once, during a FaceTime call, Mom saw a listing open on my laptop. "Are you thinking about buying?" I said maybe. Her first response was, "Make sure there's a guest room. We'd love somewhere to stay without hotel costs." She did not ask what I wanted. That was how deeply the assumption ran. The Aspen trip began as my idea, which is part of why the betrayal embarrassed me so much. My parents' 40th anniversary fell in December. Dad had always wanted to see Colorado in winter. Mom loved those pictures of mountain towns with lights in the snow. I suggested a 5-night family trip around Christmas. Mom, Dad, me, Kendra, and Brent. The children would originally come too, but once we saw airfare, ski lessons, and the size of lodging required, Kendra said traveling with 4 children would be exhausting. We discussed perhaps bringing a sitter or shortening the trip. Nothing was decided. I found a beautiful lodge outside Aspen, with enough bedrooms for everyone, and paid the deposit because my family's credit cards could not handle it. I also booked airfare with points plus cash, and paid the remaining lodging balance as my parents' anniversary gift. Nearly $19,000 total once taxes and transfers were included. It was extravagant. I could afford it technically, but the money represented months of savings. I wanted one big family memory where I was not the person carrying plates or taking the photograph. For weeks, the group chat buzzed with ski jackets, restaurant ideas, and jokes about Dad falling on a beginner slope. I requested vacation days. I bought snow boots. I pictured us drinking coffee in the lodge while snow fell outside. Then, 3 weeks before Christmas, an automated email arrived confirming guest updates to the reservation. My name had been removed from the airport transfer. Kendra's friend Holly had been added. At first I assumed it was a mistake. Then I opened the rooming notes. Mom and Dad had the primary suite. Kendra and Brent had the second. Holly and her boyfriend had the third. I was listed nowhere. I called Kendra. "Why is Holly on the lodge?" Silence. "Mom was going to talk to you." That sentence has never preceded anything good. "About what?" "The kids." I waited. "We thought it made more sense if they stayed home. They're too young. Drew won't remember it. Carter gets carsick. Sophie hates cold. And babysitters for 5 nights are insanely expensive." I knew where this was going. I still made her say it. "And? You're already flying home first, so you could stay with them." My fingers went numb around the phone. "I am going to Aspen." "Delaney, be realistic. You don't ski." "Neither does Mom." "It's Mom and Dad's anniversary. The trip was my gift." "Exactly. A gift. You don't give somebody something and then control how they use it." That sentence was so perfectly Kendra that I almost admired it. "So Holly gets my room? She's paying for her own flights. She and Brent are friends. And honestly, she makes trips fun. You'd be stressed about money the whole time." I laughed because the alternative was crying. "I paid for the lodge. And we appreciate that." Apparently from North Carolina, Kendra became irritated. "Why does everything have to become an accounting exercise with you?" I hung up. Mom called 10 minutes later. She had clearly been waiting. "Honey, before you get worked up, did you plan to tell me before I flew across the country?" "Of course." "When?" "When you got here. It's easier face to face." "Easier for whom? You expect me to fly 9 hours, then babysit 4 children while you use the vacation I bought. Don't say use like we stole something. You offered the trip, with me on it." "Delaney, you travel all the time for work. Aspen is not some once-in-a-lifetime thing for you." I had never been to Aspen. Kendra never gets breaks. She has 4 kids. There it was, motherhood as currency. My life was always more interruptible, because nobody small depended on me. Why doesn't Brent's family watch them? His mother has back problems. Why not hire a sitter? Do you know what that costs? I almost laughed again. They knew what things cost only when somebody other than me was paying. Mom ended with, "Please do not make your father's anniversary about yourself." That night I did something unusual. I did not argue. I opened every reservation I had paid for and checked the cancellation policies. The lodge had a partial refund window, ending in 48 hours. The airport transfer was refundable. 2 airline tickets had been booked using travel credits connected to my account. I canceled what legally and financially belonged to me. I did not touch flights Kendra or Brent had purchased themselves. I did not cancel Mom and Dad's airfare because those were their anniversary gifts. But the lodge, the private transfer, and the prepaid ski package had all been charged to me. I canceled them. Then I emailed the entire group. I will not be providing childcare during the Aspen trip. Because the lodging and related reservations paid through my account were changed to exclude me without my consent, I have canceled those reservations. You still have your flights and may book accommodations yourselves. I will be in Charlotte for 2 nights to see the kids and exchange gifts, but I will stay elsewhere. Nobody replied. For 3 days. I thought perhaps silence meant they finally understood. It did not. It meant nobody read the email because my family had become so accustomed to my messages containing solutions that they stopped opening them until they needed something. Which brings us back to the front door. Mom telling me the kids' schedule was on the refrigerator. Kendra handing me a diaper bag. Dad carrying ski boots. I said they should check the reservation. Kendra grabbed her phone. Her face changed first. It says canceled. Yes. Mom took the phone. What did you do? I sent everyone an email Tuesday. Nobody checks email during Christmas week. That sounds like a you problem. Dad stepped forward. Delaney, fix it. No. He stared at me like I had refused to breathe. We leave in 2 hours, then book another hotel. Do you know what that costs last minute? Yes. That's absurd. So was expecting me to pay for a trip I was no longer invited on. Kendra shoved the diaper bag at me again. Fine. We'll figure out lodging. Watch the kids. I let the bag drop gently onto the bench between us. No. The children went quiet. Carter, the oldest, looked from his mother to me. I immediately hated that the adults had created a scene in front of them. Kendra said, Delaney, don't punish the kids. I am not punishing them. You are their parent. They were told you were staying. By you. Mom lowered her voice. Honey, you are already here. For Christmas, not unpaid childcare. Family helps family. I looked at her. Family also invites family on the trip they paid for. Dad said I was being dramatic over one room. It wasn't the room. Then what is it? You removed me from my own gift and replaced me with Kendra's friend because you decided my time belonged to you. Kendra snapped. God, you make yourself sound like a victim in everything. No, I'm finally describing the same thing without helping you make it sound reasonable. Sophie started crying because she thought nobody was going to the snow. I crouched and told her gently that none of this was her fault, and Christmas was still Christmas. Kendra said, See? Now you've upset her. Something in me went quiet. You told your children they were being left behind before confirming who was caring for them. We knew you would. That is the problem, Mom said. You're their aunt. What exactly are you doing this week that matters more? I stood up slowly. Anything I choose. Her face hardened. That is unbelievably selfish. Maybe, but my answer is still no. Dad said. You came all this way just to make a point? No, I came because I hoped after 35 years, somebody might want me home without needing something. Nobody answered. That hurt more than shouting. I pulled my suitcase back down the step. Mom looked shocked. Where are you going? Hotel. You booked a hotel while we have a house? I booked it after I realized I was flying into an ambush. Kendra laughed bitterly. You planned all this. I prepared for you ignoring my no. There's a difference. Dad told me if I walked away from the family at Christmas, I should not expect everyone to forget it. You forgot me while using my credit card, I said. I think we're already testing everyone's memory. Then I left. I cried in the rental car 2 blocks away because strength is not the absence of grief. I loved those people. I loved the children. I had wanted Aspen. I had wanted Christmas. Boundaries can be correct and still feel like losing something. At the hotel, I turned off my phone for 2 hours. When I turned it back on, there were 31 messages. Mom, your father is devastated. Kendra. The kids keep asking why Aunt Delaney ruined Christmas. Dad. I raised you better than this. Aunt Ruth. Your mother says there's been some confusion. Call me before you do anything permanent. Holly, the friend who had been given my room, sent the only useful message. I just found out you paid for the lodge and were not going. Kendra told me you hated skiing and volunteered to watch the kids. I'm not going. I'm sorry. I thanked her. Then I opened social media. Mom had posted a photograph of the children standing beside packed suitcases. Caption. Sometimes holidays remind you who chooses family and who chooses themselves. Hundreds of people could see it. There was no mention that the person choosing herself had financed half the family for years. I started typing. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted it. Then I took a screenshot and closed the app. I was done arguing in comment sections for a place in my own life. The next morning, Aunt Ruth came to my hotel for coffee. She was Mom's older sister and had spent decades watching our family from enough distance to recognize things we normalized. Your mother told everybody you offered to babysit, she said. I know. She also told us you weren't going to Aspen because you travel too much already. I laughed. Ruth looked uncomfortable. There's more. Of course there was. At Thanksgiving, after I flew back to Seattle, Mom, Dad, Kendra, and Brent had discussed asking me to help with a down payment on a house for Kendra. They had even looked at listings. How much? I asked. Ruth hesitated. 50,000. I actually smiled because the number was so absurd it became clarifying. Was I in the discussion? No. So they planned my money without me. Your dad said you had a strong bonus year. How does he know? Your mom told him you mentioned it. I had told Mom I received a promotion. She had apparently translated that into available family capital. Ruth reached across the table. Delaney, your family loves you. They also have gotten very used to solving problems with your life. That was the most accurate description anyone had given me. I spent Christmas Eve with the kids anyway, not as childcare. Kendra agreed to meet me at a public holiday market because the children wanted to see me. The Aspen trip was dead, because affordable replacement lodging did not exist. Brent was furious and stayed home. Mom refused to come. Dad came only because Carter wanted him there. We drank hot chocolate and watched fake snow blow across a stage. The kids laughed. Nobody died because adults did not go skiing. At one point, Carter asked, Aunt Dee, are you poor now? I almost spit out my drink. Why would you ask that? Mom said you stopped paying for stuff. Kendra went red. Carter. He continued because children have terrible timing and excellent honesty. Grandma said you have lots of money because you don't have kids. I looked at Kendra. She looked away. There it was, handed back to me through a 9-year-old. I'm not poor, I told him. Adults are just learning that everybody pays for their own things. Even Grandma? Even Grandma. He nodded as if I had explained gravity. After the market, Kendra asked if we could talk. She was angry but quieter. What are you actually cutting off? The wording mattered. Not what are your boundaries, what are you cutting off? I told her the automatic $900 transfer would end January 1st. I would continue paying Carter's already promised spring tutoring program because I had committed directly to it. I would not pay their rent, van, groceries, vacations, or house down payment. My parents would take over their internet and insurance expenses. I had already given them notice. Kendra stared at me. So you really are doing this? Yes. We built our budget around your help, without asking whether I plan to provide it forever. You know Brent's work is inconsistent, then your budget should be consistent with inconsistent work. Easy for you to say. You have one person. I have spent years financing 6 people. Her eyes filled. You love my kids. I do. Then how can you watch them lose things? Because loving them cannot mean making you unnecessary as their parent. She flinched. That's cruel. Maybe it feels cruel because my help became normal instead of generous. She said I had no idea what motherhood cost. You're right, I don't. But I know what your motherhood has cost me. She looked as if I had slapped her. I regretted the sharpness immediately, but not the truth. I didn't mean the children. I mean the way everyone decided that because you had children, your needs automatically outranked mine. Kendra cried. I did too. We stood in a parking lot on Christmas Eve, two grown sisters finally arguing about the real thing instead of ski lodging. She said Mom had always told her I did not mind helping. I asked why she never asked me. Because you always said yes. That is not the same thing. She nodded slowly. Then she said something I did not expect. I think I liked that Mom needed me emotionally and you financially. It meant we both had a role. Except yours got celebrated. She closed her eyes. Yeah. It was not an apology yet, but it was honest. Christmas Day became the confrontation everyone had apparently been waiting for. Mom insisted I come to dinner because the children need normal. I agreed on one condition, no money discussion. She promised. 20 minutes after dessert, Dad brought out a yellow legal pad. Apparently, promises had a short shelf life in Charlotte. He had written our family expenses in columns. Parents' insurance, property tax, Kendra's rent gap, childcare, van payment, tutoring, future down payment. At the bottom was a number labeled Delaney Monthly Support, $2,750. I stared at it. What is this? Dad said. A realistic picture of how your decision affects everyone. I said no money discussion. Mom said, this isn't about money, it's about family responsibility. Of course. They had found a way to make money morally invisible while asking me for nearly $33,000 a year. Dad said I earned more than everyone else at the table combined. That does not make my paycheck communal. Mom replied, we invested in your education. I had scholarships and loans. We raised you. That was parenting, not venture capital. Kendra actually looked down to hide a smile. Dad did not. He said family success should lift everyone. It has. I pulled out my phone and opened a spreadsheet I had created after Aunt Ruth's visit. Not because I wanted repayment, because I needed to see reality without sentimental editing. Over the last 4 years, I have paid or transferred $76,400 to this family. The room went still. Kendra whispered, what? I read categories, not individual humiliations. Parents' household costs, medical bills, rent support, van repairs, groceries, camps, travel, the Aspen Lodge. Mom immediately said, you're keeping score. I started yesterday. That's disgusting. Why? Because the number is larger than the story where I never do enough? Dad said nobody forced me to help. You're right. I nodded. That's the first useful thing anyone has said. Nobody forced me. I said yes. Over and over. That is my part. I taught all of you that my yes was permanent. Mom crossed her arms. So, now we're being punished because you regret being generous. No, I don't regret what I chose. I regret the moment my choices became expectations. Kendra said nothing. Brent stared at the table. Dad told me I was abandoning the family at the exact time Kendra needed stability. Kendra is 32. She has 4 children. Which is why she needs a stable plan that does not depend on her sister's annual bonus. Then Mom said the sentence I think she had believed for years but had never said plainly. What else are you going to do with the money, Delaney? You don't have a family of your own. Every sound in the room disappeared. Kendra whispered, Mom. Dad looked uncomfortable but did not correct her. I felt something old and tender inside me, finally stop asking to be chosen. I am my own family. Mom rolled her eyes. You know what I mean. I do, that's why it hurts. I stood. You think because I don't have children, my future is empty space. My time is overflow childcare. My apartment is a guest room you haven't used yet. My savings are money, waiting for a real family purpose. Nobody said that. You just did. Dad told me to sit down. I did not. Last Thanksgiving, I cooked half the meal and took the family photograph I was excluded from. This Christmas, I paid for a trip and got removed from it because somebody needed a babysitter. And now you've written a monthly bill for the privilege of staying related to you. Mom began crying. How can you make us sound so awful? I'm describing what happened. After everything I did for you. There it was, the oldest weapon in the house. Mom, I am grateful you raised me. I am grateful for every good thing. Gratitude does not create a lifetime payment plan. Dad said if I walked out again, I might damage the family beyond repair. Then maybe we need to stop calling a system healthy, just because I keep repairing it. Kendra suddenly spoke. She's right. Mom turned toward her, as though the golden child had announced treason. Kendra's voice shook. I hate that she's right, but she is. Brent stared at her. She continued. I knew she didn't volunteer for the kids. I let Mom tell me she'd get over it because I wanted the trip. And I knew about the house idea. I looked at her. The 50,000? She nodded, ashamed. Mom said we'd ask after Christmas when everybody was in a good mood. Mom hissed. Kendra. No, stop making me the reason. Kendra wiped her face. You keep saying I need more because I have kids, and I let you. I've been letting Delaney pay for things because it made my life easier. Dad said she was overwhelmed and did not need to attack herself. I almost laughed. Even her accountability needed cushioning. Kendra looked at him. Dad, this is exactly what she means. The room went silent again. Carter wandered in from the hallway holding a toy and asked whether we were mad. Every adult immediately softened. Kendra pulled him close. I looked at those children and knew exactly why I had said yes for so long. They were innocent. But children do not become safer when the adults around them refuse responsibility. I hugged each of them before leaving. Sophie asked whether I was still her aunt. That nearly broke me. Always. Even if you don't pay for stuff? Kendra closed her eyes. I crouched. Especially then. I drove to my hotel feeling grief and relief in equal measure. Boundaries are often described like triumphant doors slamming. Mine felt like mourning a version of family I had worked very hard to believe existed. The weeks after Christmas were ugly. Mom stopped speaking to me. Dad sent practical texts listing bills as though I might panic and resume payment. I did not. Kendra applied for jobs. Brent asked for more consistent hours and began doing weekend cabinet installations independently. They moved the children out of 2 expensive extracurricular programs temporarily. Nobody starved. Nobody became homeless. The kids did not lose their mother because she had to work 25 hours a week. My parents canceled premium cable, switched insurance providers, and sold the second SUV Dad barely drove. Mom described each adjustment to relatives as something I had forced them to do. Aunt Ruth eventually replied, living within your own income is not something Delaney did to you. Mom stopped calling Ruth for a while too. I used the money from the canceled transfers in a way that felt almost criminal at first. I kept it. Then I bought a 2-bedroom condo outside Seattle that I had been quietly saving for. Nothing extravagant. Large windows, small office, balcony facing a line of cedar trees. When I received the keys, I stood in the empty living room and cried because no one else's emergency lived inside those walls. I bought a sofa without checking whether it folded out for family guests. I chose the second bedroom as an office instead of a room waiting for someone to visit. That decision alone felt revolutionary. Kendra called 2 months later. She had started working mornings at a pediatric dental office. I hate getting up at 6. That sounds terrible. She laughed. It is. Then she became serious. I got my first paycheck yesterday. Congratulations. I paid the electric bill. I waited. It was weirdly satisfying. Welcome to adulthood. Shut up. We laughed for the first time since Christmas. Then she apologized. Not perfectly, not dramatically. I think having kids became the reason I never had to question whether I deserved more help than you. Mom always said you were lucky because your life was simple. I believed her because it benefited me. I thanked her. She asked whether we could rebuild. Slowly. Without money? Definitely without money. Fair. That word meant more than I expected. Dad apologized next, months later. He called on my birthday and said, "I treated your success like a family resource because I was proud of you and afraid of failing everybody else. Those are not opposites. I know now." He admitted the down payment plan had been his idea as much as Mom's. "I thought 50,000 would mean less to you than it meant to Kendra. Maybe financially. I never asked what it meant to you emotionally." That was true. Money was not only numbers. It was missed vacations, delayed homeownership, overtime, and the quiet knowledge that every raise already had people waiting for it. We began speaking occasionally without discussing bills. Mom took almost a year. Her first apologies were not apologies. "I'm sorry you felt used. I'm sorry success changed you. I'm sorry you interpreted things so harshly." I stopped engaging. Then one December, nearly a year after Aspen, she mailed me the old Thanksgiving Christmas card. The one that said, "From our whole family," without me in the photograph. Across the back she had written, "I understand now why this hurt." Beneath it, "I think I kept telling myself you did not need a place in the picture because you had built a life somewhere else. The truth is, I was more comfortable needing you than knowing you." I sat with that for days. Then I called. She cried. I cried. Rebuilding did not mean returning to the old arrangement. Mom learned that asking once was asking. Dad stopped sending me bill screenshots. Kendra stopped joking that I had rich aunt money. The children called because they wanted to show me drawings or missing teeth, not because somebody was standing behind them prompting, "Tell Aunt Delaney the van broke." The next Thanksgiving, I did not fly to Charlotte. I hosted Friendsgiving in my new condo for 7 people. 2 coworkers, my neighbor and her girlfriend, a divorced nurse from my team, and 2 friends who had nowhere else to go. We crowded around a table, technically designed for 6. My turkey was dry. Somebody brought 3 different cranberry sauces, because none of us coordinated. After dinner, my neighbor put her phone on a bookshelf and set the timer. I automatically stepped behind everyone. She waved me forward. "Your house. You're in the middle." I stood there awkwardly because my body had memorized edges. When the photograph arrived in our group chat later, nobody cropped me. I looked at it for a long time. Not because chosen family magically replaces biological family. Life is more complicated than slogans. I still loved my parents. I still loved Kendra. I wanted those relationships to become healthier, not disappear. But that photograph showed me what inclusion feels like when nobody needs to invoice you afterward. A year after the Christmas ambush, Kendra invited me to Charlotte and asked something she had rarely asked before. "Do you want to come?" Not, "Can you help?" Not, "The kids need." "Do you want to come?" I said yes. I stayed in a hotel by choice. Nobody complained. On Christmas morning, Carter handed me a homemade card. Inside he had written, "Aunt Delaney buys us presents, but she also plays Uno and cheats." I objected to the accusation. He had evidence. After breakfast, Mom suggested a family photograph. This time, Dad set the timer. Mom arranged everyone, then looked around and said, "Where's Delaney?" I was helping Drew with a shoe. "We'll wait," she said. Such a small sentence. Years earlier, I might have needed it to heal everything. By then, I simply appreciated it for what it was. Changed behavior. I joined the picture. Kendra stood beside me. Nobody asked me to take the first one. Later, Mom posted it online with no speech about perfect families. Caption: Christmas morning. Accuracy felt warmer than performance. I never restarted the monthly transfers. That is important. Forgiveness did not mean putting the old system back online. I helped occasionally when I genuinely wanted to. When Kendra's water heater failed 2 winters later, she did not call asking for money. She complained about the estimate and told me Brent was picking up extra work. I offered to cover part as their Christmas gift. She said, "Are you sure?" That question made the gift feel different. I was. Chosen generosity feels warm. Expected generosity feels like a bill. My parents eventually stabilized their retirement without me subsidizing monthly expenses. They did not live the lifestyle they imagined, but they were fine. Dad discovered grocery store coupons with the intensity of a man entering competitive sport. Mom complained about basic cable for 6 months, then forgot why she cared. Nobody's life ended because Delaney stopped funding convenience. Mine finally began expanding because of it. I traveled for pleasure. I took a week in Vancouver without answering family money calls, because there were none. I joined a pottery class and created several objects that should never be called bowls. I dated. Some relationships went nowhere. One became serious enough that I eventually introduced him to my family, but I did not rush to turn partnership into proof that my life had become legitimate. That was another lesson. Being single had never made my life less real. The problem was, I had absorbed my family's belief that adulthood became official only after marriage and children. Once you accept that hierarchy, you begin donating your own life to people whose choices appear more important. I do not anymore. There is a framed photograph in my condo hallway now. Not the polished Christmas picture. It is one from that first Friendsgiving. Everybody is laughing because the timer caught my neighbor running back toward the group. I am near the center holding a wine glass, mouth open mid-laugh. Nothing about it is elegant. Nobody coordinated clothing. Nobody needed me to finance the evening. Every person in that frame came because they wanted to be there, and because I wanted them there. That is what family began meaning to me. Presence without an invoice. Looking back, I do not think my mother woke up one morning and decided to exploit her oldest daughter. I think thousands of small choices built the pattern. Kendra needed help, and I seemed strong. Dad needed money, and I had it. I said yes, so everyone assumed yes was painless. Then each act of generosity reset the baseline until withholding help looked like taking something away. That happens in families more often than people admit. The reliable child becomes infrastructure. Everyone praises her strength while building on top of it. Then one day she says, "I cannot carry another floor," and people accuse her of collapsing the building. I had to learn that being capable does not make me public property. Being child-free does not make my time less valuable. Earning more does not create an invisible family tax. Loving children does not make me their third parent. And paying once does not mean I promised forever. Most importantly, I learned that self-worth is sometimes very boring. It is not always a dramatic confrontation at a front door. Sometimes it is ignoring a guilt text. Sometimes it is keeping money in savings while somebody you love complains. Sometimes it is booking your own hotel instead of sleeping in a childhood bedroom where everybody expects you to resume your old role. Sometimes it is letting a parent be disappointed and discovering the world continues spinning. The Christmas I canceled Aspen, my family called me selfish. They were not entirely wrong in the way they meant it. I finally considered myself in a calculation that had included everyone except me. If that is selfishness, I had been overdue. What I did not do was abandon people. I stopped rescuing adults from consequences they were capable of handling themselves. Kendra learned she could work and parent. Dad learned a retirement budget had limits. Mom learned access to me depended on respect instead of guilt. I learned that love survives no more often than yes does. Sometimes love becomes healthier after no. Sometimes it disappears and proves what it was built on. You cannot control which happens. You can only decide whether continuing the pattern is worth what it costs you. For me, it was not. If I had stayed at that doorway, taken the diaper bag, waved while they drove to the airport, and spent Christmas babysitting children I loved while everyone else enjoyed a vacation I bought, my family would have called the week peaceful. They might even have thanked me. Then January would have brought the $50,000 house conversation. February, another emergency. Spring, another bill. And by next Christmas, I would have been angry at everyone except the person who kept saying yes. I am glad I stopped before resentment made me cruel. Boundaries allowed me to love them without secretly keeping a list of everything I had sacrificed. Today, If my mother asks for something and I say no, she sometimes still goes quiet. The difference is I no longer treat her silence like an alarm I must fix. If Kendra needs help, she asks directly and accepts either answer. Dad has never again written my monthly contribution on a yellow legal pad. We joke about Aspen now occasionally, though never casually. Once Carter asked why everyone still calls it the Aspen Christmas when nobody went to Aspen. Kendra said, "Because that was the Christmas our family finally learned." "Aunt Delaney is not a bank," Carter replied. I thought banks had more money. I nearly fell off my chair laughing. Humor became possible when it stopped protecting entitlement. And I finally understand something I wish the 25-year-old version of me had known. You do not need to become less generous to stop being used. You need to become more deliberate about who gets your generosity, when, and why. Generosity offered freely is love. Generosity extracted through guilt is a tax. I spent years paying one while calling it the other. So tell me honestly, if your family secretly removed you from a Christmas vacation you paid for because they expected you to stay behind and babysit 4 children, then reminded you that your life mattered less because you were single and child-free, would you ever financially help them again after genuine apologies and changed behavior? Or would that be the moment you permanently stopped letting family love come with a price tag?